Thanks, Beth.
Last but definitely not least, we've got our second Rohan. Rohan Borojevic is talking about using whether we can use industrial hemp as a forage or dual purpose crop. Take it away, Rohan, when you're ready.
Okay, thanks, Beth. I'll forewarn everyone that my internet might drop out. I just did it before, but it should join back up. So thanks, Beth. I'm talking about the influence of plant growth stage on the nutritional composition and regrowth of industrial hemp. And this is for its potential use as either forage or as a dual purpose crop. I don't know if that's skipped through.
Rohan, just click the screen first and then use your app.
Okay, so a bit of background. So in 2015, the commercial cultivation was legalised by the Industrial Hemp Act. And in Tasmania, it's predominantly grown for seed. It's a really fast growing summer crop. Can be from in the ground to harvest in 105 days. But currently there's very limited research into its potential use for grazing. And part of that problem as well in Tasmania is currently it's illegal to graze. But it also still has potential. And one potential application is as either a dual purpose or crop, which would increase the crop's profitability. And then given it's a summer crop as well, it'll also help with summer feed, which is sometimes short, feed gap. So we came up with a few research questions that we wanted to address. So the first one was to do with the nutritional composition and seeing how that varies with maturity. And then if it was to be used as a dual purpose crop or as a forage crop as well, then ideally sufficient regrowth would be required. So we also looked at how that changed with maturity. And then comparing it to other crops that are commonly used, other forage crops and dual purpose crops. And then also combining that sort of together to work out which growth stage or point of maturity would be optimal for grazing. So to address these questions, we had two trials that we came up with. We ran a field trial, which we assessed biomass, nutritional and also the nutritional composition, so that ADF, NDF, protein, and ash. And then in the glasshouse, we did some tests on the regrowth with simulated grazing. So the field trial was running in Cressy, and it was an industrial hemp crop that was a commercial crop that we just took samples out of. So we took samples at the growth stages 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. And these were around leaf development, and then growth stage 25 as well, which is a bit later on, whereas sort of lateral growth was starting. And then we dried out these samples and did some biomass calculations. And then we also processed them for the nutritional composition. So the biomass, we found there's a statistical difference between growth stages, which is expected. And then we expected that increase as the plants mature and they put on more leaf matter and just grow in general. So the green box on the graph indicates the minimum biomass in comparison to dual purpose canola from a few of their trials. So from that, you can see sort of growth stage 12 is a little bit not so good for grazing in terms of biomass, but 13, 14, 15, 16, there was sufficient biomass. So after we did the biomass stuff, we prepared the samples and ground them up for nutritional composition analysis. and taking the sample bags into the the lab where the other IMAS kids were working, or the students were working, was a little bit interesting. I got some raised eyebrows, but nonetheless, it worked pretty well. So then moving on into the nutritional analysis, we did protein by elemental analysis, and then we did ADF and NDF with the ANCOM 2000 automated fiber, which you can see the bags and the desiccators on the right there. And then we worked out ash by incineration in fuel. So first of all, protein. Generally, as growth stages increased, we saw a decreasing trend in protein, and this is expected and common with most pasture species. And there was a statistical difference between these growth stages. The green box on the graph indicates the levels at which we found to be to meet the MLA's best practice requirement. So this was for all classes of sheep, mostly. So obviously younger growing lambs have a greater requirement for protein, and so all of these growth stages here meet those requirements. So moving on to ADF, we had a few issues with the analysis of this, but there was a general increasing trend, but there was no statistical difference that we found between the growth stages. And then the absolute values, although we had issues, they're still low. So that's potentially limiting for livestock. So they might need supplementation for fiber. NDF, there were statistical differences with NDF. We had less issues with that. So there was again a general increasing trend with maturity. And then the green box also indicates the best practice requirement as outlined by the MLA. So as you can see, those later growth stages were the only ones that really met that. So again, supplementation might help in addressing these issues. Looking at the ash, which is a sort of approximate of the total mineral content, there's a decreasing trend found, and there was statistical differences between the growth stages. And although this gives like a good estimate, really to get proper results and find out if there's going to be issues with mineral deficiencies, then further mineral analysis would be needed. So comparing it to other forages, the protein content we found to be pretty similar to pasture species, and a little bit higher than dual-purpose canola and ryegrass. And then the NDF we found to be quite low in comparison to a lot of other pastures and also ryegrass and canola. And then the same with the NDF, although those results again are questionable. So the ADF, which are questionable. So that'll need to be retested. And then high ash results. But again, that's only an approximate, and further analysis of specific minerals will be needed. So after that, we just sort of ran a glasshouse trial to assess the regrowth. So we did this at the Hort Centre in Sandy Bay. And then, so to do this, we were simulating grazing by defoliation and then assessing the regrowth biomass after that. So we cut the plants at 12, 13, 14, and 15 and 16. So basically, we initially planned to just cut them all back to 5 centimeters as we did in the field. But after doing the first cut, I sort of looked at them a couple of days later, and I thought, I'm just going to kill 60 plants here and not get any great data out of it. So we talked to some other people and we revised the plan to cut to 12 centimeters, and then to take off the the first 2 true leaves, as that cut was above those first 2 true leaves, to cut them off to a 1 centimetre residual. So in the photos, you can see on the left the 5 centimetre cut plants, and those leaves there are just the cotyledons. And then on the right, you can see the cotyledons, and then above that, where we've cut back the leaves, first 2 true leaves. So the regrowth was, highly variable. As you can see from the photos on the right, where there was some odd growth. So plants that I thought were dead, that were cut back to 5 centimetres, regrew, and then some of the ones that were cut to 12 centimetres had poor regrowth, and it was just quite random. But generally there was poor regrowth when cut at 5 centimetres, and then better at 12. So looking at the biomass of this regrowth, it was quite difficult to gather with such random results and random regrowth. But you can see from the graph that growth stage 13, so the earlier growth stage, seemed to produce a greater amount of regrowth biomass, and there was a statistical difference between these growth stages. So bringing that all together, we sort of broke down the growth stages and assessed them individually for their grazing potential. And so the main sort of 4 methods of assessment we were using was the biomass, the protein content, the fiber content, and the regrowth. So as you can see, 13, 14, 15 could be possible. However, because of those fiber results, supplementation could be required. The protein content was pretty good through these growth stages. However, moving later through 14 and 15, the regrowth was quite poor, so that might limit its use. So addressing the research questions and concluding, we found that both the nutritional composition and the regrowth at defoliation, post-defoliation, vary considerably with the growth stage. And then we also found that it has a similar nutritional composition to other commonly used forages. And then based on the regrowth and the nutritional composition, we concluded that cutting back to 12 centimetres at growth stage 13 was likely to be optimal. But again, because of that fibre, those fibre levels, supplementation may be required. I'd like to thank the Tasmanian Hemp Association for their help, Tim Schmidt, Alistair Cameron, Caroline, Ross, Beth and Andrew, my supervisor Beth and Andrew, for all of their help, and then Caroline in the lab, and Ross for the stats, and Alistair for his crop. Thanks.
Thanks, Ron. Any questions now for Ron, please? So a question from Ron Smith, a lot of Rons today. How do you think grazing could be done to 12 centimetres to ensure decent regrowth? Sheep or beef, or would it be better to cut and conserve?
Yeah, cut and conserve could be definitely useful because you'd be able to control that height. We sort of based off crash grazing. That was sort of what we used to theorise that 12 centimetres was going to be the height that we would cut to. So yeah, we figured that they'd just take it off at 12 centimetres and then nip off the leaves. But yeah, obviously that would change with beef, the different grazing methods. But yeah, cut and conserve would definitely be an interesting option.
Thanks, Ron. A question from Adele now. What is the difference between ADF versus NDF fibre, and which one is important for animal growth?
So ADF is acid detergent fiber, and that's basically the cell walls, the cell wall components, including lignin, and then the NDF is without lignin. So basically, the lignin is less digestible for animals, but it also helps with problems like acidosis and stuff because it keeps the rumen functioning. So NDF is more applicable for animal production, but then for animal health, ADF is also quite important. But they're quite similar.
Really good answer. Any other questions, please? Okay, a question from Max. What gaps in the current sheep and beef systems do you see hemp filling as far as a feed source?
So summer, potentially, because it grows very quickly. You can grow a considerable amount of feed quite quickly. So there's obviously that benefit. As far as the current sheep and beef systems, that's probably the main use of it. But again, you know, if it was to be grown for a dual purpose crop, then combining the grazing and the grain and the seed would definitely improve its profitability and the gross margin.
Thanks. And another question from Rohan Smith. What do you think the effects would have been on seed yield?
Personally, I reckon it would have been way down, just on the regrowth. Yeah, I think it would have been way down. Obviously, that's in testing. I'm just theorizing here, but yeah, it really knocked the plants down a fair bit. Yeah.
And a question from Deepa. Is hemp used as a forage elsewhere in the world? Have there been many other studies done on its suitability as a forage crop?
So there has been a little bit on some of the byproducts of processing the seeds. So when they make hemp seed oil and stuff using what's left over from that once the oil's pressed out. But as far as actual vegetative growth, vegetative hemp, there has been very little research. We came across one study, maybe two studies that actually did what we were doing, and yeah, only one of them was on exactly what we were doing.
Great. In that case, great job, Ron. And I'll hand back over to Beth to finish off. Thanks.